Describe the kind of donations that Governor DeSantis is getting from real estate and realtors in general.
Well, it's the large ones, I guess would be the easiest way to put it. Most of them are 5 or 6 figures. And what is most notable, I think, is two things: is the sheer size. Real estate is pretty much over the last calendar year his biggest sort of industry classification as far as donors go, and also new money. So there are rich sort of real estate investors and developer types who have never been politically involved in Florida. They don't really have a donor profile or have given contributions to Florida politicians. And their first ones are to Ron DeSantis, and it's not a $20 or $30 check, it's like $60,000. So he's raised over $2 million from real estate industry folks who've never given before, which is sort of, key for any politician to unlock sort of new areas to raise campaign contributions from. That is sort of notable on those two fronts.
And as you just pointed out, not only are they big, but many of them are first time. They're not really in the political circuit, as it were. In your experience as a Florida political reporter, what do these donations from this kind of industry, what do they mean in regards to what he may pursue and he may back, since they are calling a special session for insurance next month?
Sure. Well, it's hard to tell with DeSantis specifically. Generally, you would think in a general conversation, contributions of the size will get you access. The politician will pick up the phone. You'll get a meeting. That sort of thing. DeSantis has become such a large, nationally known sort of 2024 presidential type presence in the Republican political landscape. There are a lot of new donors giving it to him just because they like him. The sort of people who can give a $50,000 or $60,000 check isn't really hurting their personal bottom line, so they can afford to do it, and they just like DeSantis. Beyond that, there are critics who are saying that the recently concluded 2022 legislative session, lawmakers left Tallahassee without doing any really big affordable housing bill. There were certainly housing advocates calling for more money put towards affordable housing than was approved this year. So there are definitely some people out there who are seeing an A to B connection on the policy front, as far as DeSantis perhaps favoring developers or those on the investment front in the housing industry, as opposed to doing some stuff for affordable housing. But I do think it's more nuanced with him, just because he's becoming such a rock star in Republican political circles.
Yeah, and just in mind, I spent most of my life in Florida, and I thought it was interesting because the first 2 years I felt, in whatever my perception matters, but I felt he was being more low-key the first 2 years, and actually a bit opposite of what he ran as. Like, he was a bit pugnacious when he was running against Gillum, and then I felt like, he tackled climate resiliency kind of stuff like early on. And then like sometime after the pandemic started, I felt like the governor that we're seeing now is more the governor that started to creep in more then and started to become a national figure. Is that what
That's right.
you thought as well?
Yeah, absolutely. When he first came into office, he surprised a lot of people by focusing on things like the environment, teacher pay increases. Some of these policies have continued, but what's different is those are the things that Governor DeSantis used to focus on. He would do press conferences and highlight issues related to more sort of, I guess, moderate, for lack of a better term, sort of things that both Republicans and Democrats can get behind. This version of the governor, while the budget has included teacher pay increases and bonuses, even in recent years, the things he chooses to focus on and amplify and spend his resources on are the sort of culture war type issues that we have seen sort of fuel the governor's rise. So the first 2 years were absolutely sort of DeSantis out of character, I guess. In the pandemic, return him to sort of his political base instinct, which is I think closer to the governor that we see today.
And home insurance and rent, they have skyrocketed, and just what we've reported on from insurance experts is that home insurance in Florida, it's jumped 25%, whereas nationwide it's been more 4 and 5%. So it's been a very Florida specific crisis, the home insurance and rent in particular. And despite a lack of hurricane landfalls, insurance companies should, at least since 2018 with Michael was something else, but 2019, 2020, 2021, no hurricane landfalls. And we were told that you know, on that basis alone, insurance companies should be relatively healthy, but they've been dropping customers or going insolvent. So there is a big issue. As you mentioned, they did not tackle the issue during the special session. What is DeSantis saying as far as why insurance has jumped so much?
DeSantis has largely punted on the issue in the sense that he's the one who called the legislature is going to return to Tallahassee likely in late May, specifically to try to pass some sort of property insurance reform. But DeSantis called that. So to the extent that he's bringing the legislature back, he's been involved. But on the policy front, sort of negotiating a deal, he's completely left to the legislature. He says whatever the House and Senate can agree to, he will almost certainly sign. But he hasn't. There is no DeSantis plan on property insurance at this point. It is, well, there's a problem. There's definitely a lot of midterm messaging on it. Democrats have hit Republicans pretty hard over the idea that they did a lot of things in Tallahassee during the legislative session, but a pocketbook issue like property insurance wasn't one of them. So there was some political heat. DeSantis knows something needs to be done, but there's no DeSantis doctrine on property insurance right now. He's saying, well, House, Senate, you guys figure it out, and I'll almost certainly sign whatever you guys can negotiate.
And it seems strange because I mean, if you look at just the politics of it, you would think in a midterm election, being at the forefront of trying to fix a big pocketbook issue would be like an easy thing. Normally I hate looking at the strategy of it because at the end of the day, people are feeling it in their pocketbooks and their bank accounts. But I'm trying to understand the logic as to why he wouldn't want to be more on the forefront on an issue that's this critical for people and what they can afford and if they can even afford to live in the state.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it has to do with the fact that he doesn't really think there's a path for him to lose in 2022. Democrats haven't done a lot. He's very popular. He's lots of money. So I think his focus is on what's next. And property insurance doesn't pop with sort of the social media or the conservative influencers or national Republicans the way some of the culture war issues do. And those are the things that really get Governor DeSantis' attention. It's hard to turn property insurance into a CRT or a banning books or the culture war sort of things that really animate Ron DeSantis. Property insurance lacks some of those things. So I think it's good, I guess, on the political strategy front. It's good for members of the legislature. Those guys are going to go back home and tell their voters, their constituents that they came to Tallahassee and did something. But it's not the sort of it's eating your vegetables. And Ron DeSantis likes to have cake, and that's really, I think, kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah. And I guess it remains to be seen how voters will respond in the midterms, because as you said, and even before that story came out, I remember Freed unveiling her affordable housing plan. I don't know if there's a real pattern between focusing on culture issues and focusing on pocketbook issues, because like on one hand, I've noticed that many people are very passionate about what he did focus on, stop woke and parental rights and education. Sure. On the other hand, sometimes I always feel like there's a risk of you're focusing on the wrong thing, kind of thing. And especially if inflation continues to be an issue, I feel like this kind of wraps around it in some ways.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right, because there's an issue that there's few issues that people almost uniformly across the state will be hit by than some of the stuff you're talking about there. You had mentioned the Freed plan. Democrats, by and large, Florida Democrats have used the term, quote, pocketbook issues more than any time since I've been covering politics here. So there really is a focus for them on those sort of things. Their problem is Ron DeSantis is very popular, and they're going to have to hope that those issues make Ron DeSantis supporters not Ron DeSantis supporters. And I think it's a pretty big gamble. The governor is an overwhelming, I think, favorite to win re-election, but Democrats are talking property insurance and affordable housing and things like that to try to mitigate some of the things that he is doing. So far, I don't know to the degree it's resonating. None of them have enough money to really communicate. So there's one thing to have a message that's on point that voters want to hear about. It's another thing to actually be able to tell them about it in a real meaningful way. And I think right now that's a problem for them.
Yeah, and in your story, I mean, the numbers were staggering. What he has compared to what everybody else on the Democratic side has combined. I mean, it's like 5 or 6 times what they have. And that, I mean, again, like me not being more of a seasoned political reporter, I don't know if message would win out ahead
Yeah.
of money, or if lack of money hurts the message kind of thing. Like, I guess that will just
Right.
play out as it does.
Sure.
Um, Looking at the early polling, certainly it does look like he is a favorite for reelection. Um, is there a sense on the Democratic side that
Mhm.
this is a vulnerability, which is why they've been leaning into it?
Yeah, I think so. There's at least that attempt. That's definitely the concerted focus and strategy for Democrats. But it's a strange dynamic that's developing, that voters, especially the intense Ron DeSantis supporters, are more willing to vote for someone who's fighting on these culture war issues than issues that necessarily impact their pocketbook. It's this weird disconnect where there's issues the legislature might not be dealing with that impact someone's paycheck or ability to put food on their table, but there's still an intensity around these other issues, and that's, I think, why Republicans have been focusing on them more and more. I don't know what their internal polling shows, but I would very much be willing to bet that the issues that get all of the attention are getting the attention for a reason, because their numbers are showing that that's what move voters and motivate voters more than, I guess, drier and maybe harder to politicize issues. Well, property insurance is easy to politicize, but it's harder to soundbite than some of the culture wars type stuff.
Yeah, and what you said is really what I've been thinking, because I've been like, I feel like there are some things that I know, like nationally, that President Biden has passed that are popular. Like a lot of people supported USPS reform, a lot of people supported the big infrastructure bill. But with
Sure.
inflation being the number one, it's kind of like, what are you doing there to help stymie it? Um, and in Florida, it seems like just the opposite, where he's popular based on the issues that you would almost think he should be unpopular on, not doing property insurance. Very interesting dichotomy, and
Yeah.
certainly I think you'd agree Florida is an interesting place politically.
Yes.
Um, so going forward, then, with this kind of money being pumped in, um, could we expect to see something significant from the legislature that even though he said he would definitely sign it, could we expect to see something that might hurt realtors' bottom line? Or
No,
would
well,
any of
it's
it
it's
hurt
yeah,
realtors' bottom line?
it's not this one. The property insurance isn't, I don't think, gonna include well, at least not yet, a real affordable housing element. So not real realtor types, but I don't think the House and the Senate have never historically, for years, have never really agreed on property insurance reform. That's what scuttled it during the legislative session. I still don't think they're very close. So my guess is there's going to be some small band-aid or some cosmetic fix next month that doesn't necessarily do a lot in the near term, but will allow them to go home and tell folks, hey, we held a special session on property insurance. We're working on the issue. It allows them to look busy, even if not a lot is actually getting done.
I hear you there. And so it may still be something that we talk about extensively, regardless as to how it resonates anyway, um, with the public at large. It may be something we still talk about if there's nothing significant that comes out of the legislature and into law.
Yeah, well, without question, the big the legislative leadership is about to turn over, so there'll be a new Senate president and a new House Speaker. I think there is some hope, but that'll happen in November, I believe. I think there's some hope going into next session that the new incoming legislative leadership is a little closer on the issue, and something could happen during the 2023 legislative session. But I would be shocked if any major reform, any major election year reform happened prior to that.
The only other thing I want to ask, and it's just based on what you just said, is um, the Senate and the House in Florida have never really agreed. Is there
Mhm.
any reason why, or are the two bodies attracting two totally different kinds of people?
Yeah, that's actually kind of it. The insurance companies and the traditional sort of business groups that have long funded Republican politics are represented in the Senate. A lot of senators are loyal to those sort of special interests. Trial attorneys and those who kind of want access to the courts and want to be able to sue more sort of those types of attorney groups are really represented in the House. The House leadership was supported by trial attorney money in a real way, and those two groups are dogs and cats on this issue. Insurance companies say rates are so high because Florida is a very litigious state, and a lot of frivolous lawsuits can be filed. And the House is saying, well, the Senate is trying to water down policies that are going to hurt policyholders and going to hurt homeowners to help insurance companies. And that's sort of the broad sort of baseline disagreement between the House and the Senate, and it's been a sticking point for years.
Is there anything else you'd like to add on the basis of your reporting and these donations and home insurance crisis in general in the Florida arena?
Yeah, just that no matter, there's going to be a lot of talk of next month. There'll be news stories and things about a special session over property insurance, but I don't believe anything big is going to happen. And I think anyone who comes out of this talking about some large sweeping omnibus insurance reform is probably doing it for political ends, and I wouldn't anticipate rates going down anytime in the near future.